For my speech, I decided to title it The Facade of Marilyn Monroe. I really focused on Marilyn and different aspects and perspectives that some people may not know. I want to talk about her childhood, what made her iconic, how people still see her as famous and iconic to this day, and her speaking voice. My first article is titled Marilyn the Icon, and I got it from bfi.org. The author of the article is by Mary Wild. This author, really focuses on Marilyn's voice, and the author mentions that Marilyn was in an orphanage or foster home. I believe it was an orphanage. That Marilyn started all of a sudden just had a stutter. And unfortunately, this stutter never went away. But when Marilyn really got into acting and was starting to be in films and things, she really wanted to fix her stutter. And like I just said, the stutter never went away. But Marilyn did try to hire acting coaches to help her deliver some of her lines that she really stuttered on. But it never concealed very well sometimes, because she would even still, like while being filmed, would stutter. But nonetheless, Marilyn was still iconic, and her voice was also in itself was very iconic. My next article is titled Life is a Legend, Marilyn Monroe, and I got it from the Fine Arts Center, coloradocollege.edu. This article focuses on what made her so iconic. Marilyn had an acting career of 16 years, and she was in 30 films. The author talks about how Marilyn was very charming. She had people charmed because she was just so beautiful, and she was also very enchanting, which I thought was a very unique, and I couldn't have said it any better myself, because she truly was enchanting and is enchanting still. They also talk about how Marilyn, her brand was she was the sex appeal, and she was comedic, and she could it came natural to her. She is also still one of the most famous women in Hollywood, and I feel like that is safe to say, as well as I feel like the article is really trying to emphasize that she was a blonde bombshell, and that Marilyn was the it girl then, and even still now. She, I'm sure, is what many people have been inspired by her, and Marilyn is, I'm sure, one of, if not the best blueprint that people probably go off of in terms of acting and, kind of old Hollywood type films and things and such. My next article is titled Who Was the Real Marilyn Monroe? And I got it from the Smithsonian Mag.com. The author of this article is Grant Long. He really focuses on Marilyn being a persona and not really a real person, because Marilyn's real name is Norma Jean Baker, or Norma Baker. Marilyn was just a name Norma Jean came up with. It wasn't actually her real name. The article also mentions a Netflix film titled Blonde, and in this article, as well as in the film, it brings up the idea and kind of the question that Marilyn, the name Marilyn, was just a persona for Norma Jean, and it was kind of like a practice. Like, it just helped her, act a little bit better. That was her brand. That was her persona. And it is really interesting, because I've never thought of Marilyn being a persona and kind of someone she channeled to kind of just really help her get into being who she was, and being Marilyn, and being good on film, and being an actress. And I also think, from knowing about her childhood, it was an escape for her as well. My next article, by Reed Clemmy, is titled The Real Story of Marilyn Monroe, from the Tattler.com. This article mentions how Marilyn was very dedicated to her craft from very early on, that she wanted to fit in but not too much so that she would also stand out. The next and final article I have is titled About Marilyn Monroe, 6 Things You Probably Didn't Know, from Vogue.com. This article, I really could not believe this, but Marilyn was iconic in like the films she did, and even to this day, Marilyn is still very iconic. And this article really highlights that because it mentions the fact that Mariah Carey, there are things, it's a thing called Monroe Mementos, and it is where celebrities, for example, Mariah Carey, bought a white baby grand piano which belonged to Monroe for over $600,000 in 1999. So that's like even more in today's, it has even more value. So even though Marilyn is gone, she is and still is very iconic.